So on February 28th, the morning of the raid, I remember I woke up. It was just an average day. I remember walking down the hall to the foyer area where David was sitting with Robert Rodriguez and they were talking. I kind of remember, I don't remember the conversation. It seemed a little heated, but it wasn't out of the ordinary. David and Robert had some passionate exchanges before when it came to scripture. And I just remember thinking, okay, standard operating procedure. There's Robert again. He'd been over every day for a couple months, so I really didn't think too much of it. I walked back. I got my oatmeal, not millet, and I remember I was just kind of eating there, and I started to hear like some doors slamming and some commotion going on. And apparently, what had happened is in the interim, David Jones had come in and said that he told David that he had had an experience with a news truck down the street asking where it was there was some raid going on. I found that out later. What happened was I started to hear commotion, people running up and down the hallway. I was still in the cafeteria area. David had come down the steps, and at this point I could hear a helicopter. Yeah, off in the distance. And David came down the steps. There was a couple guys with him, and he said, "Don't anyone do anything stupid. They're coming. They're on their way. I'm going to go to the front. I'm going to talk to them. Don't anyone do anything stupid. We want to work this out." And I just remembered, okay, that's good. At least we're going to try to, talk to these people. And I didn't know what was happening. I mean, usually when you think of a raid, I don't know. I thought someone was going to knock on the door and serve some kind of warrant or something. I didn't realize it was going to be this whole big thing. And I was surprised when I heard helicopters. But not surprised, because we had heard helicopters at Bud's the building quite a bit before. But anyway, he went up the hallway right after saying that. And it was not, it seemed like from the time he left the cafeteria area to get up to the hallway, and I could hear, "Hold on, there's women," and I could hear some like yelling at the door. And then pock shots started, just shots. It sounded like they were coming from the front. And then it was just a lot of shots, a lot of fire. And I remember looking out the side of the cafeteria door, and I could see a figure in black coming up like over the hill. And so I remember shutting that door and locking it, and then going into and just so everyone knows, no illusions of grandeur here. I lived in Hollywood. When you hear gunshots in Hollywood, you get on the ground and you let the tourists look around to see where the gunshots are coming from. So you and you hear a lot of gunshots in Hollywood. So you kind of learn to get down, and that's just what I did instinctively. So I crawled into the hallway and into the first room on my right, which happened to be the weight room. And I laid there until the shooting stopped. And it was weird because it seemed to happen very quickly, but it seemed to take forever at the same time. So when you're looking back, the firefight seemed like it was nothing, no amount of time at all. But when you're going through it, it just seemed like it took an incredible amount of time, like an hour. I guess it was 40 minutes altogether before the ceasefire was established. And it was established with, I think it was Steve running up down the hall saying, "Ceasefire, we're trying to establish a ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire." That went on and on and on. So, yeah, it's just a lot of gunshots. It sounded like it was coming from the outside, but it's hard to tell. Early on after the raid, I talked to Kevin Whitecliffe, who was out back. And Kevin saw the helicopters coming and shooting. And I guess he saw Peter Gent get shot by the helicopters.
And where was Peter Gent? Where was he located?
Peter Gent was up on a water tower at the back of the structure, and he was cleaning the water tower out. That was his task for the week. And he was killed on top of that water tower by the helicopter. The helicopter also fired into the first story in the back. There were 3 water tanks in front of a window. That window is where Winston Blake's room was. And they fired into the water tanks, and they killed Winston Blake. He was sitting on his bed eating a piece of French toast. Now, after the ceasefire, I remember, interesting, I just remembered this. During this, wow, that's weird. during the siege, someone ran down the hall. Think it was, I can't remember who it was. Someone ran down the hall to the underground structure. Oh my God, I've forgotten about this. And I crawled down the hall to where the underground, to where there was a trap door that opened up and you went down into the underground structure. But before I got there, there was this water coming out from the last room. And there was I can't believe I just remembered all that. There was a blanket up over the bedroom door. And I opened the blanket and it was really bright because there was a window there. And I went from being dark to having my eyes having to adjust to the light. And I saw that the window was shattered and there was water pouring into the room. And it was pouring through bullet holes that had come through the plastic, the side of the plastic, which was a big, huge, round thing that held water in front of the Winston Blake's window. And I remember following the stream of water that was coming in down to a bulk that was on the ground. And it was just this one guy that was all on his side, not facing me, facing away from me. And I could tell by the jacket it was Winston Blake. And there was absolutely no movement. There was a pool of blood by his head, and I was pretty convinced that he was dead. I didn't check or anything. I remember just moving, just letting go of the blanket and trying to keep my breakfast in because that was the first dead body I'd ever seen.
So yeah, let me just get a couple things clarified. So the blanket was in his doorway. Is that where the blanket was?
Instead of having a door, yeah, there was a blanket.
And then down at the end of the hall there, probably right more or less in front of our close to Winston's room, at the end of the hall, there was a trap door that led to a tunnel that led to the storm shelter. Am I right? Is
Yes.
that where you were going?
Yeah. And after that, that's where I ended up. And now that I think of it, I think it was Oliver Guyarfis that was down there with me, but I'm not 100% sure. And I think, I'm not 100%, I can't remember exactly who that was. I'd have to check. It's probably in my book. That's 25 years ago. It's funny how the mind works. But I know someone was in there and they had a firearm and they were worried about people coming up through the underground structure. And I went down there and I just realized I'm useless down here. So I went back up. And at that time, the ceasefire was being negotiated as I was crawling back up the hallway from the other side.
Yeah, and the ceasefire, one purpose of course, everybody inside the building wanted the shooting to stop. But on the part of the ATF agents, they wanted a ceasefire so they could collect their dead and wounded, right?
Yes. That's what it seems like. Yes, yeah, and assess the damage. I mean, I guess they realized they had lost at that point. And one of the most amazing things, there's certain scenes in your life you never forget. For some people, it's your son or daughter being born. Is probably your wedding day. It's these beautiful moments in life, and I have some of those as well. But for me, one of the things I will never forget as long as I live, other than Winston's body, seeing that, is after the ceasefire. I remember going into Greg Summers' room, and he was yelling about the dogs, that they had shot the dogs. The first thing they did was shoot, because he took care of the dogs, Fawn, an Alaskan Malamute, and her 5 pups. And I remember just being stunned with that information, looking out the window and seeing the amount of ATF agents walking away. And there was some coming from my right peripheral, walking up the road. I saw the guys carrying another ATF guy off over the hill. There's like a little hill that goes up Mount Carmel. And they're walking away from it, and they peppered the side of the hill. I couldn't believe how many of them there were. I guess there's 75. It just seemed like there was hundreds walking away. I was just amazed at the size and the scope of the raid, how many there were. And they were looking at me and us through the windows with the most puzzled look on their faces. And it was a look of to me it was a look of an arrogant ass who got his ass kicked and didn't expect it at all. And the look of shock and surprise that they were walking away from that building without obtaining their objective, or whatever terminology they would use. They looked like a bunch of bullies that just got their ass kicked, is what they looked like. And I actually felt sorry for them, until I started to find out how many of our people they had killed. Then I felt a lot less sorry for them. But I'll never forget the expression on their faces.
Okay, and could you briefly mention who else got killed? You mentioned Winston.
Yep. That first day, right after the siege, I remember laying in one of the bunks, and I was in shock, and I was just like, your mind doesn't know what to think. You know, your life's just changed. You don't know how. You don't know, are we going to jail? They're going to come in and shoot us. So many things run through the mind, but just the shock of that experience, the tunnel vision, and everything that comes with it. So you're sitting in bed, and I'm paralyzed with fear. And people are running up down the hall, and I'd hear Steve say, J.D. Wendell's dead, and then Winston Blake's dead, Perry Jones is wounded, he's shot in the stomach, Peter Hipsman's dead, and through the course of the next hour or so, you would just hear about the different friends of yours that were dead, no longer with you, that died in the gun battle. You're just, oh my God, it's just like, oh my God, they killed our friends. This is crazy. I don't know. It was paralyzing for me. That's the first time going through anything like that. So, I was not really combat ready.